Amara Johnson froze as the champagne glass shattered at her feet, first-class passengers staring in disgusted silence. Through tears, she noticed only one person move to help the unassuming man in seat 2A, who nobody realized controlled the fate of everyone on board, including the flight attendant who just humiliated her. Before we dive into this incredible story of what happens when privilege meets accountability at 30,000 feet, where are you watching from today? Take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of transformation. Now, let me take you back to how Amara Johnson found herself in first class that fateful day. 24-year-old Amara Johnson had never imagined she would be sitting in first class on one of the most prestigious airlines in America. Growing up in South Chicago, luxury travel seemed like something that happened in movies, not real life, certainly not her life. From her childhood apartment, where sirens served as nightly lullabies, Amara had fought her way into MIT's computer science program through sheer brilliance and determination. Her mother, Denise Johnson, had worked 3 jobs simultaneously to keep a roof over their heads: morning shifts at a hospital cafeteria, afternoon bookkeeping for a local business, and weekend cleaning gigs. Despite the exhaustion etched permanently into the lines of her face, Denise never missed a parent-teacher conference or a science competition. "They can take everything from you," Denise would tell Amara, "but they can't take what's in here." She would tap her daughter's forehead gently. "Fill this with everything they say you can't have." And Amara had. Despite being the only black woman in most of her advanced classes, despite professors who assumed she was there to fulfill a quota, despite classmates who never invited her to study groups, Amara had graduated top of her class. Her algorithm for airline security systems was revolutionary, adaptive learning, and more effective at identifying genuine threats while reducing racial profiling. When Skyways Airlines reached out about implementing her system, Amara couldn't believe it. A company founded by a black man, Marcus Reynolds, wanting her innovation. The contract would set her up financially for years. The first-class ticket they sent for her presentation meeting felt like validation of everything she had worked for. The night before her flight, Amara called her mother. "I'm so proud of you, baby," Denise said, her voice cracking slightly. "Your father would have been too." Amara's father had been a mechanical engineer before a traffic stop turned deadly when Amara was just 8. The officer claimed he saw a gun. There was no gun, only a man reaching for his license as instructed. The memory of her father made this opportunity even more significant. Amara spent hours preparing for this trip, selecting her most professional navy blue suit, carefully organizing her presentation materials, practicing answers to potential questions. She'd even watched YouTube videos about first-class etiquette, determined not to seem out of place. When her alarm blared at 4 a.m., Amara was already awake, her stomach knotted with equal parts excitement and anxiety. The Uber driver kept glancing at her in the rear-view mirror as she directed him to the first-class drop-off area. At security, an agent double-checked her boarding pass, looking between it and her face with poorly disguised surprise. "This is correct?" the agent asked. "Yes," Amara replied, her voice deliberately steady. "I'm flying first class to San Francisco." After clearing security, Amara found the first-class lounge. The attendant at the entrance smiled thinly when checking her credentials. Inside, she chose a quiet corner seat, aware of sidelong glances from other travelers. A businesswoman clutched her handbag tighter when Amara sat nearby. An older man frowned at her over his newspaper. None of this was new to Amara. These were the small indignities she'd been navigating her entire life. The assumption that she didn't belong in certain spaces, that her presence was an anomaly to be questioned. Usually, she built an invisible armor around herself, mentally rehearsing how to respond to potential confrontations. Today, though, the armor felt heavier, her nerves already frayed from the importance of the upcoming meeting. When boarding began for first class, Amara joined the line, her boarding pass clutched perhaps too tightly in her hand. She felt, rather than saw, the gazes of those around her, the silent question of her presence in this exclusive queue. "First class is boarding now," a gate agent said pointedly when Amara approached. Yes, I know. I'm in first class, Amara replied, handing over her boarding pass. The agent's eyebrows lifted slightly as she scanned the document. So you are, she said, her tone suggesting this was an unusual occurrence. Enjoy your flight, Miss Johnson. As Amara walked down the jet bridge, she took deep breaths, reminding herself that she had earned this seat. Her algorithm was saving the airline millions, while making air travel safer for everyone. She belonged here as much as anyone. Stepping onto the plane, the lead flight attendant, a blonde woman whose name tag read Bethany, smiled automatically before her eyes fell on Amara. The smile froze, then dimmed considerably. Right this way, Bethany said, her voice noticeably cooler than it had been for the passenger ahead of Amara. The first-class cabin gleamed with luxury wide leather seats, real glassware already set out, hot towels waiting. Amara found her window seat in the third row and settled in, placing her small briefcase carefully under the seat in front of her. All around, business people in expensive suits and casual but costly leisure wear were arranging themselves, none making eye contact with her. Across the aisle, an older man in seat 2A watched the boarding process with quiet interest. His simple clothing, khakis, and a button-down shirt with no tie or jacket made him seem slightly underdressed for first class, though nobody seemed to be giving him the same scrutiny. Amara felt directed at herself. He caught her eye briefly and offered a small, polite nod before returning to the book in his hands. As the final boarding announcements were made, Amara tried to relax into her seat, reminding herself that in a few hours she would be presenting her work to Skyway's executives. This flight was just a small part of her journey. She could handle whatever came her way. She had no idea just how much would come her way before this flight landed, or how that unassuming man in seat 2A would change the trajectory of her career and life forever. The pre-flight service began almost immediately after the cabin door closed. Bethany moved efficiently through the first-class cabin, offering champagne, orange juice, or water to each passenger with practiced charm. Her smile was bright, her banter effortless, as she addressed passengers by name somehow already memorized from the manifest. Mr. Whitfield, welcome back. Your usual scotch after takeoff. Mrs. Chen, lovely to see you again. Still sparkling water with lime, correct. When Bethany reached Amara's row, she breezed past without making eye contact, moving to serve the passenger across the aisle. Amara told herself it was an oversight. Perhaps Bethany hadn't seen her. But as the flight attendant continued serving everyone else, the pattern became unmistakable. Twice more, Bethany passed Amara's seat without acknowledgement. The man in seat 2A had been served promptly, though Bethany hadn't engaged him in the same familiar banter she used with other passengers. He accepted his water without comment, his attention seemingly divided between his book and the interactions around the cabin. After 15 minutes, when every other passenger had been offered refreshments, Amara pressed her call button. Bethany's smile tightened almost imperceptibly as she approached. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice professionally neutral but lacking the warmth she'd shown others. "Could I have some champagne, please?" Amara requested politely. Bethany's eyebrows raised a fraction. "Champagne is complimentary only for first-class passengers," she explained, as if speaking to a child. "If you're in economy, I can." "I am in first class," Amara interrupted quietly, trying to keep her voice level. "Seat 3A. The flight attendant's eyes narrowed slightly. "May I see your boarding pass, please?" No other passenger had been asked to verify their seating assignment. Amara reached for her handbag, extracting the boarding document. Bethany examined it with unusual thoroughness. "This is for today's flight?" she questioned. "To San Francisco?" "Yes," Amara confirmed, her jaw tightening. "Today's flight, this seat first class." "I'll need to verify this with my colleague Bethany," said, walking away with Amara's boarding pass. At the galley, she conferred with another flight attendant, Lisa, both glancing repeatedly in Amara's direction. The man in 2A had lowered his book, watching the exchange with increasing attention. Several other passengers were also observing, some with uncomfortable expressions, others with undisguised curiosity. When Bethany returned, she handed back the boarding pass with visible reluctance. "I'll bring your champagne," she said tersely. As promised, she returned moments later with a flute of golden liquid. As she extended it toward Amara, her movement seemed somehow awkward, the glass tilting slightly. Before Amara could fully grasp it, champagne sloshed over the rim, splashing onto the portfolio containing her presentation materials that rested on her lap. "Oh," Bethany exclaimed, though her surprise seemed performative. "I'm so sorry about that." Amara gasped as the liquid soaked through the leather portfolio to the papers. Inside months of work, her security algorithm, diagrams, implementation plans, all now threatened by spreading moisture. My presentation, Amara, scrambled to move the wet portfolio, trying to minimize the damage. Instead of helping or offering additional napkins, Bethany stepped back. "Well, you should be more careful about where you place your items," she said, her tone suggesting this was entirely Amara's fault. First-class passengers usually know to use the side table for beverages. The criticism was delivered just loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. A few chuckled quietly. An older woman across the aisle muttered something about these people to her seatmate. "These people," Amara echoed, looking up sharply. "What does that mean?" Bethany's lips pressed together in a thin line. "I simply meant inexperienced travelers," she said, though her tone conveyed a different message entirely. "We often get passengers who find themselves in first class through upgrades or point redemptions, who aren't familiar with the protocols." The implication was clear. Amara didn't belong here, couldn't possibly have earned her seat legitimately. "I have every right to be here," Amara said, her voice trembling slightly, despite her efforts to remain composed. "And I expect to be treated with the same respect as every other passenger." Of course, Bethany replied with an insincere smile. "Though respect is a two-way street. We have standards in first class that everyone is expected to maintain." Lisa, who had been watching from nearby, approached with a condescending smile. "First time in first class, honey. It can be overwhelming. Maybe you'd be more comfortable in—" "I'd be more comfortable being treated like every other passenger." Amara interrupted her patience wearing thin. Bethany sighed dramatically. These situations always happen when certain people try to move where they don't normally. Amara stood suddenly, unable to contain her frustration any longer. The champagne glass, which she had balanced precariously on her armrest while trying to save her documents, toppled to the floor. It shattered with a crisp, crystalline sound that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent cabin. Every eye turned toward her. Bethany stepped back with exaggerated caution, as if Amara posed some threat. The moment hung, suspended in horrified silence, a black woman standing amid broken glass in first-class tears of frustration and humiliation, threatening to spill from her eyes. "I think," Bethany said into the silence, "this demonstrates exactly what I was saying about certain passengers not being quite ready for the first-class experience." Not a single person spoke in Amara's defense. Some passengers stared openly. Others averted their eyes in uncomfortable silence. No one challenged Bethany's behavior or offered support. No one except the man in seat 2A, who quietly closed his book, placed it on his seat, and stood. Without fanfare or announcement, he stepped into the aisle and moved toward the small disaster unfolding in front of everyone's judging eyes. The man from seat 2A knelt beside the shattered glass, pulling a handkerchief from his pocket to carefully gather the larger shards. His movements were methodical and unhurried, as if cleaning up broken glass in the middle of a first-class aisle was a perfectly normal activity. "Let me help you with that," he said to Amara, his voice calm and measured. He had the kind of voice that commanded attention without raising its volume, a voice accustomed to being heard. Bethany's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing annoyed surprise at this passenger's intervention. "Sir, please return to your seat," she insisted. "We'll handle this. It's a safety issue." "I believe the safety issue began well before the glass broke," he replied without looking up. His focus remained on helping Amara collect her now dampened presentation materials. "Do you have digital backups of these?" he asked her quietly. "Yes," Amara whispered, still fighting back tears of humiliation. But I needed the printed copies for my meeting. The man nodded thoughtfully. We'll figure something out. He turned to Bethany, who stood watching with thinly veiled impatience. I think we'll need some club soda for these champagne stains, and perhaps a plastic bag for the broken glass. Also, this young woman needs a replacement drink served properly this time, and some additional napkins. Something in his tone made Bethany hesitate before she responded with forced cheerfulness. Of course, sir. Right away. As Bethany retreated to the galley, the man extended his hand to Amara. I'm Marcus, he said simply. Amara Johnson, she replied, accepting his handshake. His grip was firm but not overwhelming, a businessman's handshake. Marcus Reynolds had not planned to reveal his identity on this flight. At 55, he had developed a routine for these undercover journeys on his own airline. Dressed in business casual, rather than his usual bespoke suits, wearing glasses instead of his contacts, and carrying a weathered leather messenger bag instead of his customary briefcase, he became just another passenger, unremarkable, unmemorable, and perfectly positioned to observe how his airline truly operated when no one was watching. He had founded Skyways Airlines 15 years earlier after a distinguished career as an Air Force pilot, followed by a frustrating stint at one of the major commercial airlines. There, despite his impeccable record and credentials, he had repeatedly been passed over for advancement. The breaking point came when a white colleague with half his experience and a documented safety violation was promoted to a position Marcus had been told he wasn't quite ready for yet. Marcus had cashed in his retirement savings, secured investors who believed in his vision, and launched Skyways with just 3 planes and routes between 5 cities. Now the airline boasted a fleet of 70 aircraft serving domestic and international destinations with a reputation for exceptional service and innovative practices. Or so he had believed until today. As he helped Amara clean up the mess, Marcus was mentally reviewing everything he had observed since boarding. Bethany Miller was a senior flight attendant who had been with Skyways for nearly 8 years. Her personnel file showed consistent performance ratings and positive customer feedback. Yet what he was witnessing today suggested a disturbing pattern of behavior that somehow had never been flagged in the system. Even more concerning was the behavior of the other crew members who either actively participated in the discrimination or stood by without intervention. This wasn't a lone employee having a bad day. This was systemic. While helping Amara blot champagne from her portfolio, Marcus discreetly activated the voice recorder on his phone. As CEO, he had the authority to document workplace incidents, though he usually preferred to rely on the established reporting channels. Today, however, those channels had clearly failed. You mentioned a meeting, he said conversationally to Amara. May I ask what kind of work you do? I'm a software developer, she replied, still focused on salvaging her materials. I designed a new security algorithm for airlines. I'm actually heading to a meeting with Skyways to discuss implementation. Marcus nearly dropped the paper he was holding. You're Amara Johnson, the Amara Johnson who developed the AdaptSec system. Surprise, registered on her face. You know about my work. I try to stay informed about innovations in the industry, he said, carefully not ready to reveal his position. Your algorithm could revolutionize how airlines handle security while reducing bias in the screening process. It's brilliant work. For the first time since the incident began, Amara smiled slightly. Thank you. Not everyone appreciates the bias reduction elements. Some companies just want the efficiency improvements without addressing the racial profiling issues. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Both aspects are equally important. A truly secure system can't be built on discriminatory foundations. Bethany returned with club soda and napkins, handing them to Marcus rather than Amara. Here you are, sir, she said, her tone markedly more respectful than it had been with Amara. We'll have this area cleaned up shortly. Thank you, Marcus replied immediately, passing the supplies to Amara. And the replacement drink I requested? Oh, Bethany faltered. I thought perhaps, given the situation, it might be best to wait until after takeoff. Marcus fixed her with a steady gaze. The situation, as you put it, is that a first-class passenger requested a pre-flight beverage that was subsequently spilled. I see no reason why a replacement shouldn't be provided immediately as it would be for any other passenger. His emphasis on any other passenger was subtle but unmistakable. Bethany's smile tightened further. "Of course," she said. "I'll bring that right away." As she walked away, Marcus returned his attention to Amara. "I apologize for what you're experiencing," he said quietly. "It's unacceptable." "Thank you for saying that," Amara replied, her voice equally low. "But I'm used to it. This happens more often than you might think." "That doesn't make it right," Marcus said, a hint of steel entering his voice. "And it certainly doesn't make it legal." What neither of them knew was that Marcus's planned meeting with Amara Johnson had been scheduled for the following day. Her arrival at headquarters was something he had been looking forward to, having reviewed her work extensively with his technical team. The algorithm she had developed wasn't just innovative, it was exactly what the industry needed to move toward more equitable security practices. Now, watching her try to maintain her dignity while being openly discriminated against on his airline, Marcus felt a complex mix of emotions: anger at his staff, disappointment in the culture that apparently existed without his knowledge, and a growing determination to address not just this incident, but the underlying issues it revealed. The aircraft began its pushback from the gate, the engines rumbling to life as the safety demonstration began. Throughout the presentation, Bethany avoided looking in Amara's direction while the second flight attendant, Lisa, demonstrated the oxygen mask procedure with exaggerated motions directly in front of Marcus and Amara, as if ensuring they were paying attention. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Marcus made a decision. He wouldn't reveal his identity immediately. First, he wanted to see just how deep the problem went and how the situation would develop if left to run its course. Only then could he truly understand what needed to change. Little did Bethany and the rest of the crew know that their careers, and indeed the future direction of the entire airline, now hung in the balance, their every action being observed by the one person with the power to transform the company from the top down. As the aircraft reached cruising altitude, the discriminatory treatment of Amara Johnson didn't improve, it escalated. The seatbelt sign had barely turned off when the cabin crew began their in-flight service, moving through the first-class cabin with practiced efficiency. Or rather, moving through most of the first-class cabin. "Would you care for a hot towel, sir?" Bethany asked Marcus, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, thank you," he replied. "And one for Miss Johnson as well, please." Bethany's smile flickered. Of course, she said, though she made no move to offer Amara a towel from the basket she carried. Instead, she continued down the aisle, serving other passengers. Lisa approached minutes later with the beverage cart. "Cocktail, sir?" she asked Marcus cheerfully. "After Miss Johnson has been served," he replied, gesturing to Amara. Lisa's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Oh, I think Bethany is handling her section." "We're in the same section," Marcus pointed out mildly. The flight attendant's professional mask slipped for just a moment before she turned to Amara with a brittle smile. "What would you like?" The question lacked the warmth and solicitude she had shown other passengers. "Sparkling water with lime, please," Amara requested. Lisa poured the water and handed it over without adding a lime, despite the fruit tray clearly visible on her cart. She then immediately turned back to Marcus. "And for you, sir?" "I'll have the same," he said, "with lime, please." His emphasis on the last word was subtle but clear. When Lisa handed him his drink, complete with lime, Marcus immediately turned to Amara. "Would you like my lime slice?" he offered loud enough for Lisa to hear. "Thank you," Amara accepted with dignity, taking the small green wedge. A silver-haired executive type seated across the aisle leaned over to the woman beside him. "First class is really going downhill these days," he muttered, not particularly concerned about being overheard. "They'll let anyone up here with these diversity programs." The woman nodded in agreement. "I paid full fare for my ticket. I wonder how she got hers." Amara's shoulders stiffened. She pulled out her laptop, attempting to focus on making edits to her presentation rather than the uncomfortable atmosphere surrounding her. When meal service began 30 minutes later, the pattern continued. Amara's order was taken last, and when the meals were delivered, everyone else in first class received their food while her tray table remained empty. "Excuse me," Amara finally said as Bethany passed by for the third time. "I ordered the chicken." "We're currently out of the chicken option," Bethany informed her, with poorly concealed satisfaction. "I can offer you the pasta instead." The gentleman in 4B just received the chicken, Amara pointed out, gesturing to a passenger who had been served after her order was taken. "That was the last one," Bethany claimed implausibly. "Pasta or nothing." Marcus, who had been quietly observing while eating his own meal, set down his fork. "Interesting," he commented. "I distinctly overheard you telling the galley you had 8 chicken and 6 pasta remaining when service began. By my count, only 5 chicken meals have been served so far." Bethany's expression froze. "I'll check again," she said stiffly, disappearing into the galley. She returned moments later with a chicken meal that looked suspiciously like it had been set aside all along. "It appears we found one more," she said, placing it roughly in front of Amara. As Amara began to eat, she noticed something unusual about her meal. While the presentation looked correct, the chicken was cold in the center, as if it hadn't been properly heated. The vegetables were oversalted to the point of being nearly inedible. "Is your meal prepared properly?" Marcus asked quietly, noticing her expression. "Not really," Amara admitted. "But I don't want to cause more problems." "It's not causing problems to expect the service you paid for," Marcus replied. Their conversation was interrupted by the overhead speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds." The pilot's voice filled the cabin. "I've been informed of a situation in the first-class cabin. I want to remind all passengers that respect for fellow travelers and crew is a requirement on Skyway's flights. Let's all work together to ensure a pleasant journey for everyone." The announcement, clearly prompted by some communication from the cabin crew, left little doubt about who was being characterized as the problem. Several passengers glanced toward Amara with disapproval. The businessman across the aisle snorted. "About time they said something. Some people just don't know how to behave in first class." His companion nodded. "Probably used to flying budget carriers. Skyways should be more careful about who they upgrade." Amara closed her eyes briefly, gathering her composure. When she opened them, she found Marcus watching her with an expression of quiet respect. "You're handling this with remarkable grace," he observed. "I've had plenty of practice," she replied, with a sad smile. "This is just another day as a black woman in America, especially in spaces where people don't think I belong." "Would you mind telling me more about your experiences?" Marcus asked. Not to satisfy curiosity, but to understand. Amara studied him for a moment, considering. Then, in a low voice, she began sharing snippets of her reality, being followed by security in high-end stores, having professors assume she was in the wrong classroom, being mistaken for service staff, at professional events, watching less. Qualified classmates receive opportunities she had to fight for. "The algorithm I developed actually came from these experiences," she explained. "Current security systems flag anomalies, people who don't fit expected patterns. But those expectations are built on biased data. If you're constantly flagged for not belonging, you're wasting security resources and creating trauma for innocent travelers." "That's brilliant," Marcus said sincerely. "You've turned a painful personal experience into a solution that helps everyone." Their conversation was interrupted when Bethany approached, pointedly ignoring Amara. "Sir, is there anything else I can get for you?" "Actually, yes," Marcus said. "Miss Johnson pressed her call button several minutes ago. Perhaps you could address her request first." Bethany's eyes widened slightly. The call button above Amara's seat was indeed illuminated, though she had deliberately ignored it during several passes through the cabin. "Of course," she said through clenched teeth, finally turning to Amara. "How can I help you?" "I'd like some coffee, please," Amara requested politely. "We'll be starting coffee service shortly for the entire cabin," Bethany replied dismissively. "Everyone else has been offered beverages on request throughout the flight," Marcus observed. "Why would coffee be different?" Before Bethany could respond, the businessman across the aisle interjected. "Oh, for God's sake, some people are just never satisfied. First time in first class and acting like she owns the place?" A few passengers murmured in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable, but remained silent. Bethany seemed emboldened by the passenger's comment. Perhaps she suggested to Amara with false concern, "You might be more comfortable in economy. I'd be happy to find you a seat there." The suggestion that Amara should remove herself from a space where she was paid to be was so blatantly discriminatory that even those passengers who had been quietly judging her looked shocked. Amara straightened in her seat, her voice firm despite her distress. "I purchased a first-class ticket. I'm entitled to first-class service. I'll stay right here, thank you." Marcus had remained silent during this exchange, his expression unreadable, as he reached into his pocket and withdrew his phone. He appeared to be texting someone, his fingers moving swiftly across the screen. Moments later, his phone buzzed with a response. After reading it, he put the phone away and turned his attention back to the situation at hand, a hint of resolve hardening his features. "Have you ever witnessed discrimination like what Amara's experiencing on this flight? Comment number 1, if you believe Bethany should be immediately removed from the flight, or number 2, if you think she deserves a chance to explain herself." This story is about to take a dramatic turn that nobody on this plane saw coming, especially not Bethany. If you're finding this story powerful, now's the perfect time to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We bring you these real-life lessons about standing up against discrimination every week. What do you think Marcus is about to do? Is he just a kind stranger, or could he be someone with more influence than anyone realizes? Let's continue and find out exactly what happens when someone with actual power witnesses racism in action. The next drink service was underway when Marcus Reynolds finally decided it was time to act. He had observed enough. The pattern of discrimination was undeniable, systematic, and appeared to be an accepted practice among the cabin crew. Most disturbing was how many passengers seemed to tacitly approve, or at least accept, the behavior as normal. When Bethany once again approached their row with her practiced smile offering premium spirits to the passengers around them while conspicuously ignoring Amara, Marcus made his move. "Bethany," he said calmly, "I'd like to see the in-flight service accommodation report form, please." The flight attendant's smile faltered slightly. "I'm sorry, sir. What form did you say?" "The accommodation report form," Marcus repeated. "The one for documenting service delivery issues. It should be in your standard paperwork. Section 4, subsection C of your flight attendant manual covers this specifically." Bethany stared at him, confusion evident on her face. Passengers in nearby seats had turned to watch the exchange with interest. I'll have to check with the lead flight attendant," she stammered. "That won't be necessary," Marcus replied. He reached into his pocket and produced a business card, handing it to her. "I'm Marcus Reynolds, founder and CEO of Skyways Airlines. And I'd like that form immediately, please." The effect was instantaneous. Bethany's face drained of color as she stared at the card, then at Marcus's face recognition finally dawning. The quiet, unassuming man in 2A was actually the founder of the entire airline, her ultimate boss, flying incognito on his own plane. "Mr. Reynolds," she gasped. "I didn't. We weren't expecting." "Clearly," he replied, his voice level but carrying an unmistakable edge of authority. "The form, please. And I'd like the purser to join us as well." Bethany nearly stumbled in her haste to retreat to the galley. Murmurs spread rapidly through the first-class cabin as passengers realized what was happening. The businessman who had been making derogatory comments suddenly became intensely interested in his laptop screen, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Amara turned to Marcus, her expression a mixture of surprise and dawning understanding. "You're the CEO of Skyways, the Marcus Reynolds." He nodded, offering a small smile. "I am. And you're the brilliant mind behind the security algorithm we've been eager to implement. I was looking forward to meeting you tomorrow at headquarters, but it seems we've had an unscheduled preview under less than ideal circumstances. You fly undercover on your own airline, Amara asked, still processing this revelation. Regularly, Marcus confirmed. It's the only way to truly know what's happening when no one thinks management is watching. Though I admit, today's observations have been more enlightening than usual. Bethany returned with the head purser, a senior flight attendant named Michael, both looking distinctly uncomfortable. Michael carried a clipboard with several forms. Mr. Reynolds, Michael began formally, "This is unexpected. Had we known you were aboard—" "That's precisely why you didn't know," Marcus interrupted, his tone pleasant but firm. "I fly as a regular passenger to experience the actual service we provide, not a special version reserved for the boss." He accepted the clipboard and began filling out the form methodically. "I'll be documenting multiple incidents of discriminatory behavior directed at Miss Fike Johnson, including but not limited to selective denial of service, disparaging comments, and deliberate humiliation, all of which appeared to violate not only our company policies, but potentially federal aviation regulations regarding equal treatment of passengers." Bethany's composure cracked. "Sir, I can explain. There was a misunderstanding." "Was there?" Marcus looked up from the form, his gaze direct. "A misunderstanding when you questioned Miss Johnson's right to be in first class multiple times. A misunderstanding when you spilled champagne on her presentation materials and blamed her. A misunderstanding when you served everyone else promptly but repeatedly ignored her. Misunderstanding when you suggested she move to economy, where she'd be more comfortable." Bethany fell silent, her face flushing deep red. Marcus turned to address the entire first-class cabin, his voice carrying clear authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, I feel I should clarify something for everyone aboard this aircraft. Skyways Airlines was founded on a principle of exceptional service for all passengers, not some passengers, not passengers who look a certain way or come from certain backgrounds. All passengers." He stood commanding the full attention of everyone in the cabin. "What I've witnessed today falls dramatically short of that standard. The behavior directed toward Miss Johnson has been frankly appalling, and equally disappointing has been the willingness of many of you to participate in or silently condone that treatment." The cabin was utterly silent now, the tension palpable as Marcus continued. "Let me be absolutely clear. Skyways has zero tolerance for discrimination of any kind. This isn't just a policy on paper, it's a core value I personally enforce. Miss Johnson is not only a valued first-class passenger, she's also the creator of a revolutionary security algorithm that Skyways is implementing across our entire system. An algorithm designed, ironically, to reduce exactly the kind of biased profiling that she herself has experienced on this flight." Several passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The businessman who had made derogatory comments earlier stared fixedly at his tray table, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. Marcus turned to Michael. "I'll need to speak with the entire crew immediately. Is the junior flight attendant capable of monitoring the cabin for a few minutes?" "Yes, sir," Michael confirmed, clearly shaken. "Jenny can handle the cabin while we meet." "Good." Marcus turned back to Amara. "Miss Johnson, I want to extend my personal apology for what you've experienced today. It is completely unacceptable and in no way represents the values of the company I've built. If you'll excuse me for a few minutes, I need to address this situation with my staff." Amara nodded, still processing the dramatic turn of events. "Thank you," she said simply. As Marcus followed Bethany and Michael toward the galley, a hushed conversation broke out among the remaining passengers. Some looked mortified, others defensive, a few contemplative. The businessman who had made the rude comments earlier caught Amara's eye briefly, before quickly looking away, embarrassment evident in his expression. In the confined space of the airplane galley, Marcus faced the assembled flight crew: Bethany, Michael, Lisa, and Jenny, the junior attendant. Their expressions ranged from defensive to afraid to genuinely remorseful. "This isn't just about today," Marcus began, keeping his voice low but intense. "What I witnessed suggests a pattern of behavior that's become normalized. I want to understand how and why that happened." Michael stepped forward. "Sir, I want to assure you that I'm not interested in assurances right now," Marcus interrupted. "I'm interested in honesty. Has this happened before, the differential treatment based on a passenger's race?" A heavy silence fell over the group. Finally, Jenny, the most junior member of the crew, spoke up. "Yes," she admitted quietly. "There is an unspoken practice, especially in first class. Certain passengers get extra scrutiny, particularly if they don't fit the usual profile." "And who decides what the usual profile is?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. "It's not official policy," Bethany interjected, finding her voice. "It's just, we're taught to be vigilant about passengers who might be in the wrong cabin or who might make other premium passengers uncomfortable." "Taught by whom?" Marcus demanded. Senior crew Lisa admitted. "During training, it's passed down. We're told it's about maintaining the premium experience." Marcus took a deep breath, controlling his anger. "So discriminatory behavior has been institutionalized as unofficial policy handed down from senior to junior staff, all under the guise of maintaining the premium experience. And no one thought to question this or report it up the chain." "Some have tried," Jenny said softly. "They don't last long. They get labeled as not team players or difficult to work with, and eventually leave or get pushed to less desirable routes." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. This wasn't just about a few prejudiced employees. This was a systemic issue that had been allowed to fester within his company right under his nose. "Bethany," he said, turning to the senior flight attendant, "you're being relieved of duty for the remainder of this flight. When we land, you'll report to HR for a full investigation. Your future with this company will depend on the findings of that investigation and your willingness to acknowledge and correct your behavior." Bethany paled, but nodded, understanding the seriousness of the situation. Michael Marcus continued as the purser, "You're responsible for the service standards on this flight. Your failure to address this situation is equally concerning. You'll continue your duties today, but you'll also be subject to review." "Yes, sir," Michael replied, visibly shaken. "Lisa, you participated in this discriminatory behavior. Like Bethany, your future with Skyways will depend on the forthcoming investigation." Marcus turned to Jenny, whose courage in speaking up had not gone unnoticed. "Jenny, I'm placing you in charge of first-class service for the remainder of the flight. I expect exemplary equal treatment of all passengers starting immediately." "Yes, sir," Jenny responded, straightening her posture with newfound confidence. "I'm calling an emergency executive meeting for tomorrow morning," Marcus informed them. "This goes beyond this flight crew. We clearly have a cultural problem that needs to be addressed company-wide." As they prepared to return to the cabin, Marcus had one final instruction. "The captain needs to be informed of these changes, and I want a new announcement made retracting the earlier implication that Miss Johnson was causing a disruption. Am I clear?" All four nodded, the gravity of the situation evident in their expressions. When Marcus returned to his seat, the atmosphere in the cabin had shifted palpably. Passengers who had been openly disdainful earlier now seemed uncertain, even chastened. Amara sat quietly, her dignity intact, despite everything she had endured. "Is everything all right?" she asked as he settled back into his seat. "Not yet," Marcus replied honestly, "but it will be. Changes are already in motion, both for this flight and for Skyways as a whole." Minutes later, the captain's voice came over the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Rogers. I want to extend a sincere apology for my earlier announcement, which incorrectly characterized a situation in our first-class cabin. Skyways is committed to providing respectful, equal service to all our passengers, and we regret any suggestion to the contrary. Additionally, I'm pleased to inform you that we have a special guest on board today, our founder and CEO, Marcus Reynolds. Mr. Reynolds, the entire flight crew welcomes you aboard." A few passengers applauded politely, though the sound was muted by the lingering discomfort in the cabin. The dramatic shift in power dynamics had left everyone slightly off balance, wondering what would happen next. They wouldn't have to wait long to find out. With Bethany relegated to the rear galley for the remainder of the flight, Marcus seized the opportunity to conduct an immediate investigation into what he now recognized as a systemic problem. Using the secure executive access on his tablet, he connected to the company's internal network through the aircraft's Wi-Fi system. "I hope you don't mind if I work for a bit," he said to Amara. "There are some things I need to look into immediately." "Of course," she replied. "I should probably try to salvage what I can of my presentation anyway." Marcus navigated to the company's customer feedback database, entering search parameters for complaints related to discriminatory treatment. What he found was alarming. Over the past 3 years, there had been 237 formal complaints alleging racial or ethnic discrimination by Skyway's staff. Of those, only 43 had been escalated beyond initial review. Only 11 had resulted in any documented corrective action. "This can't be right," he muttered, digging deeper. The pattern became clear as he examined the data. Complaints were consistently downgraded in severity or classified as misunderstanding or customer perception issue rather than potential discrimination. The system was effectively burying evidence of a serious problem. Marcus switched to the employee reporting system, looking for internal complaints or concerns about discriminatory practices. Here, the picture was equally troubling. 28 employees had filed reports about witnessing discrimination against passengers over the same period. Most of these employees had subsequently received lower performance ratings, been reassigned to less desirable routes, or had left the company altogether. Sir Jenny approached now, handling the first-class service. "Can I get you anything?" "Yes," Marcus replied, making a quick decision. "Could you ask Flight Attendant Rodriguez from Economy to join us for a moment, and please stay as well?" When Elena Rodriguez arrived looking nervous, Marcus gestured for her to take the empty seat beside him. "Miss Rodriguez, I understand you filed a report last year about discriminatory treatment of passengers. I'd like to hear about your experience." Elena glanced around anxiously before speaking. "Yes, sir. I observed several incidents where passengers of color were treated differently, especially in premium cabins. I reported it through proper channels, but nothing happened, except that my schedule suddenly changed to all overnight flights, and my performance reviews started mentioning communication issues." "And you," Jenny Marcus turned to the junior flight attendant. "Have you witnessed similar issues?" Many times, Jenny admitted quietly. It's an open secret among the crew. There are even code words used over the intercom or crew phones to alert others about passengers who don't look like they belong in business or first class. Marcus's expression darkened. Code words. Like asking for a premium verification or calling someone a courtesy upgrade, Jenny explained. It signals to other crew members to watch certain passengers more closely or check their tickets repeatedly. "Jesus," Marcus muttered, running a hand over his face. He turned to Amara, who had been listening with a pained but unsurprised expression. "Did you know about this? Is this common across airlines?" "I suspected something like this existed," Amara replied carefully. "It's why my algorithm includes pattern recognition for discriminatory service delivery. The system flags when certain passengers consistently receive different treatment, longer wait times, more document verification, fewer amenities offered. But without access to internal airline data, I couldn't prove it was systematic rather than individual bias." Marcus turned back to his tablet, this time accessing the system as CEO rather than through the filtered dashboards usually presented to executives. Raw complaint data began flooding his screen, painting a picture far worse than the sanitized reports he received monthly. "I need both of you to document everything you've observed," he told Elena and Jenny. "Not through the usual channels. Send it directly to my executive email. Include names, dates, specific incidents, and any patterns you've noticed. You have my personal assurance that there will be no retaliation." As they returned to their duties, Marcus placed a secure call to his Chief Operating Officer, Diane Chen. "Diane, I need you to pull together an emergency meeting for 7 a.m. tomorrow. Executive team, HR leadership, and legal. We have a serious situation." He explained what he had discovered hearing Diane's sharp intake of breath. "How did we miss this?" she asked, audibly distressed. "The quarterly reports never indicated." "Because the reports are filtered," Marcus interrupted. "Someone's burying these complaints before they reach us. I need you to find out who and how, and I want complete access to the raw data from now on." After ending the call, Marcus returned his attention to Amara, who was still trying to repair her dampened presentation materials. He said thoughtfully, "Your algorithm might be even more valuable than I initially realized. If it can detect patterns of discriminatory service in real time, we could implement corrective measures immediately, not just for security, but for customer service as well." Amara looked up, intrigued. "I designed it to be adaptable to various applications. The core pattern recognition could absolutely be applied to service delivery metrics. Would you be willing to expand the scope of our potential collaboration?" Marcus asked, "beyond security implementation to a company-wide application?" "That depends," Amara replied carefully. "Would Skyways be committed to acting on what the algorithm reveals, even if it means significant cultural changes?" "After what I've witnessed today, absolutely," Marcus affirmed. "In fact, I'd like to bring you in as a consultant on our diversity and inclusion initiatives, as well as implementing your technical solution." Their conversation was interrupted by Michael the purser, who approached with visible trepidation. "Mr. Reynolds, there's something you should see." He handed over his tablet open to an internal messaging system used by flight crews. The conversation displayed was disturbing. Several crew members from various flights discussing techniques for managing passengers who didn't fit their idea of first-class clientele, sharing stories of how they'd discouraged certain people from getting too comfortable in premium cabins. "This is a private crew group," Michael explained. "Not officially sanctioned by the airline, but widely used. I've been part of it for years, though I rarely post. After what happened today, I felt you should see it." Marcus scrolled through the messages, his expression hardening with each swipe. Some posts were merely insensitive, but others were explicitly racist, classist, and xenophobic. Most disturbing was the casual tone. This wasn't presented as controversial behavior, but as standard practice, even something to be proud of. "How widespread is this?" Marcus asked, his voice tight. "About 60% of senior cabin crew are members," Michael admitted. "Plus some gate agents and customer service staff." "I want every name," Marcus stated flatly. "Every single person who's part of this group." As Michael returned to the galley to compile the list, Marcus turned to Amara, his expression troubled. "I founded this airline 15 years ago specifically to create a more equitable flying experience. Somewhere along the way, that vision got lost, at least for part of our staff." "It happens in many organizations," Amara offered. "The founders' values don't always translate to every level, especially as the company grows." "That's an explanation, not an excuse," Marcus replied firmly. "I should have been more vigilant. Random undercover flights a few times a year clearly weren't enough." For the next hour, Marcus worked steadily on his tablet, drafting new company policies, restructuring the complaint review process, and designing a top-to-bottom audit of service delivery metrics broken down by passenger demographics. Occasionally, he would ask Amara for input, valuing her perspective, both as the algorithm designer and as someone who had experienced the discrimination firsthand. The flight was entering its final hour when the captain requested that Marcus visit the cockpit. After excusing himself to Amara, he made his way forward where Captain Rogers and First Officer Phillips welcomed him with evident concern. "Sir, word has spread through the crew about what happened," Captain Rogers began. "I want you to know that many of us had no idea this was going on, or at least not to this extent. The question is, what do we do now?" First Officer Phillips added. "This goes beyond one crew or one flight." Marcus appreciated their candor. "We rebuild from the ground up if necessary, starting with how we hire, how we train, and how we measure success. Premium service can no longer be code for catering to certain passengers at the expense of others." By the time Marcus returned to his seat, the aircraft had begun its initial descent into San Francisco. Jenny was providing attentive professional service to all first-class passengers, including Amara, who was now being treated with the respect she deserved. The businessman who had made derogatory comments earlier caught Marcus's eye as he returned to his seat. "Mr. Reynolds," he said, his tone subdued, "I want to apologize for my behavior earlier. It was unacceptable." "I'm not the one who deserves that apology," Marcus replied, pointedly glancing toward Amara. The man nodded, chastened, and turned to Amara.
"Miss Johnson, I'm truly sorry for my comments and attitude. There's no excuse for how I behaved."
Amara acknowledged his apology with dignified grace. "Thank you for saying that. I appreciate your willingness to recognize the impact of your words." As the aircraft began its final approach, Marcus turned to Amara with newfound respect and determination. "When we land, I'd like you to join me for a meeting with my executive team, not just about your algorithm, but about helping us transform this airline from the inside out, if you're willing." Amara considered the offer. "I came here to implement a security system. What you're suggesting is much broader." "It is," Marcus acknowledged. "But after today, I believe you're exactly the person we need to help us see our blind spots and build a truly inclusive airline. The technical implementation is important, but the cultural transformation is essential." The genuine sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. For Amara, who had spent her career fighting to be seen and heard in rooms where people like her were rarely welcome, the opportunity to effect systemic change was compelling. "I'll need to think about it," she said honestly. "This is a bigger commitment than I anticipated making today." Of course, Marcus respected her caution. "Take whatever time you need. The offer stands regardless of your decision." As the plane touched down on the runway, neither Amara nor Marcus could have anticipated just how far-reaching the consequences of this single flight would become, not just for Skyways Airlines, but for the entire industry. The remaining hour of the flight marked the beginning of a remarkable transformation in the first-class cabin. With Bethany relegated to the back of the aircraft and Jenny now in charge of premium service, the atmosphere shifted noticeably. "Good afternoon, Miss Johnson," Jenny said as she approached with a fresh selection of beverages. "Would you care for something to drink before we begin our descent?" "Sparkling water with lime would be lovely," Amara replied, still somewhat guarded after her earlier experiences. "Of course. And would you prefer the lime squeezed in or on the side?" This small act of thoughtfulness, offering Amara choices rather than assumptions, was a subtle but significant shift. Jenny provided the same attentive service to every passenger, her professionalism unwavering, regardless of who she was addressing. Marcus observed the change with approval, though he recognized it was just the beginning of a much larger transformation that would be needed. A silver-haired woman across the aisle, who had previously watched Amara's mistreatment in uncomfortable silence, leaned over hesitantly. "I should have said something earlier," she admitted quietly. "I saw how they were treating you, and I just stayed quiet. I'm sorry for that." "Thank you for acknowledging that," Amara responded. The apology wasn't a magic eraser for the humiliation she'd endured, but the woman's willingness to recognize her complicity through silence was meaningful. Another passenger, a middle-aged Asian American man, joined the conversation. "I've experienced similar treatment on other airlines," he shared. "Not as blatant, but the same pattern. Repeated ticket checks, fewer service offerings, subtle suggestions that I was in the wrong place. I always told myself I was imagining things." "You weren't," Amara assured him. "These microaggressions are designed to be deniable individually, but the pattern becomes clear over time." "That's precisely what your algorithm detects, isn't it?" Marcus interjected thoughtfully. "Patterns that might be dismissed as coincidence when viewed as isolated incidents." "Exactly," Amara confirmed. "The system looks for statistical anomalies in service delivery across demographic groups. A single missed drink service might be an oversight, but when passengers of certain backgrounds consistently experience longer wait times, fewer offerings, or more document verification that indicates a systemic issue, their discussion attracted the attention of other passengers who began sharing their own observations and experiences. What had started as an uncomfortable confrontation was evolving into a thoughtful dialogue about privilege, accountability, and institutional change. Jenny returned with a tray of fresh coffees, distributing them with equal attention to all passengers. The businessman who had made derogatory comments earlier now sat quietly listening to the conversation with a pensive expression. Suddenly, the aircraft encountered a patch of turbulence, causing drinks to slosh and passengers to grip their armrests. The seatbelt sign illuminated with a soft chime. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is First Officer Phillips," came a voice over the intercom. "We're experiencing some moderate turbulence as we pass through a weather system. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts securely." As the plane pitched and rolled, a look of concern crossed Jenny's face. "I need to secure the galley," she said, hurrying down the aisle. Amara noticed the navigation display on her seatback screen, showing the aircraft deviating from its planned route. "They're trying to find a smoother altitude," she explained to the nervous-looking woman beside her. "The aircraft's weather radar is detecting wind shear ahead." "You know about aviation?" the woman asked, surprised. "Part of my software development work involved studying flight patterns and navigation systems," Amara explained. "Commercial aircraft have sophisticated systems for detecting and avoiding turbulence, but sometimes you can't avoid all of it." As if on cue, the aircraft gave a particularly sharp jolt, causing several passengers to gasp. Amara remained calm, continuing her explanation of how pilots navigate through turbulent air masses. Her technical knowledge and composed delivery had a settling effect on those around her. Marcus watched with admiration as Amara transformed from someone being judged and excluded to someone whose expertise was being actively sought and valued, all within the span of a few hours. This was the power of allowing people to contribute their full selves without the barrier of discrimination. When the aircraft emerged from the turbulence, the atmosphere in the cabin had shifted once more. Passengers who had earlier participated in Amara's isolation were now engaging with her respectfully, asking questions about her work and listening attentively to her answers. "Your algorithm sounds revolutionary," remarked a tech executive who had previously avoided eye contact with her. "The applications go far beyond airline security." "That's the goal," Amara acknowledged. "Bias detection can be applied to hiring processes, lending decisions, healthcare delivery, any system where human judgment might be influenced by unconscious prejudice. Skyways would be foolish not to expand our implementation beyond the original security focus," Marcus added, making no effort to hide his admiration for Amara's work. "In fact, I'm already envisioning applications across our entire operation." As the flight began its final descent into San Francisco, Michael approached Marcus with an update. "Sir, I've completed the list of crew members participating in that messaging group as requested, and I've added my own name as well. I was part of it even if I rarely posted." Marcus accepted the tablet with a nod of acknowledgement. "Thank you for your honesty, Michael. That will count in your favor during the review process." "What happens now?" Michael asked, genuine concern in his voice. "For all of us," Marcus considered the question carefully. "That depends on several factors: the nature of individual involvement, willingness to acknowledge wrongdoing, commitment to change, and capacity for growth. This isn't about punishment for its own sake, it's about transforming our culture." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "For what it's worth, sir, what happened today has already caused a lot of reflection among the crew. Messages have been flying back and forth, not in that group, but in private conversations. People are worried, but they're also questioning practices we've taken for granted." "Good," Marcus replied. "Discomfort can be the beginning of growth." As Michael returned to his duties, Amara turned to Marcus. "You're handling this differently than I expected," she observed. "Most executives would be focused on damage control and liability limitation. I'm more concerned with fixing the actual problem than managing perceptions of it," Marcus explained. "My father used to say that true leadership means being willing to burn down what you've built if that's what's needed to rebuild it right." As the aircraft touched down in San Francisco, the first-class cabin had been transformed. The same physical space that had earlier been a site of discrimination and discomfort was now filled with genuine conversation and respectful interaction. When the seatbelt sign was turned off, several passengers approached Amara to exchange contact information or continue discussions they'd started. The businessman who had made derogatory comments handed her his business card with a humble request: "My company could use consulting on diversity issues." If you're ever interested, I'd appreciate the opportunity to learn from you." Jenny approached as passengers began to gather their belongings. "Miss Johnson, Mr. Reynolds, thank you both for today. I've been wanting to speak up about these issues for months, but was afraid of the consequences. Seeing you take action has given me hope that real change is possible." "Change is not only possible, it's imminent," Marcus assured her, "and voices like yours will be essential to the process." As Amara and Marcus prepared to disembark, they exchanged a glance of shared understanding. What had begun as a routine flight had transformed into something much more significant, the catalyst for organizational change that would ripple far beyond this single aircraft or airline. The journey toward transformation had only just begun, but the first steps had been taken. Sometimes, all it took was one person willing to stand up and another willing to listen and act on what they heard. When Skyway's Flight 1427 touched down at San Francisco International Airport, neither the crew nor the passengers could have anticipated what awaited them at the gate. News traveled quickly in the age of social media, and somehow, perhaps through a text from a crew member or a discreet message from someone in corporate headquarters, word had leaked that Marcus Reynolds was aboard and had witnessed a disturbing incident of discrimination. As the aircraft taxied to the terminal, Marcus's phone buzzed with urgent messages from his public relations team. Media presence at arrival gate read one text. Multiple outlets requesting comment, re-alleged discrimination incident. "That was fast," he muttered, showing the message to Amara. "Are you surprised?" she asked. "Discrimination on airlines has been a hot topic. Remember Dr. David Dow being dragged off that United flight, or the Muslim passengers removed for making people uncomfortable by simply speaking Arabic." Marcus nodded grimly, which makes it even more inexcusable that we've let similar issues fester at Skyways. As the seatbelt sign turned off and passengers began retrieving their belongings, Marcus made a quick decision. "Miss Johnson, if you're comfortable with it, I'd like you to join me for a brief statement to the press. Not to exploit your experience, but to demonstrate that we're taking this seriously and working directly with those affected." Amara considered the request carefully. "I'll join you, but I won't be used as a prop or a quick fix for your PR problem. If we do this, we're talking about real changes, not just damage control." "Absolutely," Marcus agreed without hesitation. "This isn't about optics. It's about accountability and transformation." As they disembarked, Marcus instructed his security team to escort Bethany, who had been relieved of duty, through a separate exit to avoid a public confrontation. She would be met by HR representatives who would begin the investigation process immediately. Near the arrival gate, a small cluster of reporters and camera operators had gathered, alerted by sources within the airport about the developing story. Marcus approached them directly, Amara at his side, by choice rather than obligation. "Mr. Reynolds, can you confirm reports of a discriminatory incident on today's flight?" called out a journalist from a local news station. "Is it true you fired a flight attendant mid-air?" asked another. Rather than dodging the questions, Marcus addressed them head-on. "Today, while traveling as a regular passenger on one of our flights, I witnessed behavior that falls far short of Skyway's standards and values. Miss Amara Johnson, a distinguished software developer and first-class passenger, was subjected to discriminatory treatment that is completely unacceptable." The cameras turned to Amara, who spoke with composed dignity. "What happened today isn't unique to Skyways. It's a reflection of broader patterns of discrimination that persist throughout many industries and institutions. What is unique is having someone with authority present to witness it firsthand and take immediate action." Marcus continued, "Effective immediately, Skyways is launching a comprehensive review of our service delivery practices, complaint handling procedures, and corporate culture. This isn't just about one incident or one employee. It's about ensuring our airline lives up to its founding mission of providing exceptional service to all passengers without exception or discrimination." Meanwhile, in a private room near the gate, Bethany sat across from two HR representatives, her face ashen as she attempted to justify her actions. It wasn't about race, she insisted, though her voice wavered with uncertainty. It was about maintaining standards in first class. Some passengers just don't understand the etiquette. "And how do you determine which passengers those are?" asked Terrence Washington Skyway's newly appointed Chief of Diversity and Inclusion, who had been hastily called in for the meeting. "Well, you can just tell," Bethany responded vaguely. "By how they dress, how they act." Miss Miller Terrence interrupted firmly. "I need you to consider very carefully what criteria you're actually using to make these determinations. Because based on the reports from multiple witnesses, including our CEO, it appears that you're making assumptions based on racial characteristics rather than behavior." Bethany fell silent, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. After 15 years as a flight attendant, including 8 with Skyways, her career hung in the balance because of behaviors she had come to see as normal, even expected. "What happens now?" she finally asked, her voice small. "You'll remain on paid administrative leave while we conduct a full investigation," explained Sarah Chen from HR. "During this time, you'll be required to participate in interviews with our team, review service records from your past flights, and provide a written statement regarding today's events." "And then?" "That depends on several factors," Terrence replied, "including the findings of our investigation, your level of accountability and insight regarding your actions, and your willingness to participate in corrective measures if those are deemed appropriate." Back at the arrival gate, Marcus was concluding his impromptu press conference. "I want to be clear, this incident, while deeply regrettable, also represents an opportunity to examine our practices with fresh eyes and to build a more inclusive airline that truly serves all our passengers with equal respect and attention." A reporter raised her hand. "Mr. Reynolds, some might say this is just a one-time PR response to avoid a viral incident. How will you ensure lasting change?" Before Marcus could answer, Amara stepped forward. "If I may address that question," at Marcus's nod, she continued, "as someone who develops algorithms specifically designed to detect patterns of bias, I can tell you that sustainable change requires 3 elements: accurate data collection, transparent analysis, and consistent accountability. Mr. Reynolds has invited me to consult on implementing these elements at Skyways beyond my original security algorithm project. I wouldn't have accepted if I didn't believe he was genuinely committed to systemic change." As the press conference concluded, Marcus's executive team was already assembled in a conference room at Skyways' San Francisco offices. The tension in the room was palpable as Marcus and Amara entered, all eyes turning to the CEO, who had just publicly acknowledged a serious failure within his organization. "Let's be absolutely clear," Marcus began without preamble. "What I witnessed today was not an isolated incident. It was the manifestation of a cultural problem that we've either ignored or failed to recognize. Either way, that stops now." He turned to his chief operating officer. "Diane, I want a complete audit of our complaint handling system. How many discrimination complaints have we received in the past 5 years? How were they categorized? What actions were taken? And most importantly, who has the authority to downgrade or dismiss these complaints before they reach Executive 20? Review." Diane nodded already, making notes. "I'll have preliminary findings by morning." "Good." Justin Marcus addressed his chief technology officer. "You'll be working directly with Ms. Johnson to expand the implementation of her algorithm beyond security to service delivery metrics. I want real-time analysis of service patterns across demographic groups." The CTO looked surprised, but quickly recovered. "Of course, we can begin outlining the technical requirements immediately." For the next 2 hours, the meeting continued at an intense pace, with Marcus outlining a comprehensive plan for organizational transformation. By the time it concluded, every executive had specific assignments and deadlines for the coming days and weeks. As they prepared to leave, Diane approached Amara. "I want to apologize personally for what you experienced today. As COO, the service standards of this airline are ultimately my responsibility." "Apologies matter," Amara acknowledged, "but actions matter more. I'll be watching what happens next very closely." That evening, as Amara settled into her hotel room, her phone buzzed with notifications. The story had broken across social media platforms with hashtags like #Skyways Accountability and #First Class While Black trending nationally. Video clips from the press conference were being shared widely, drawing both praise for Marcus's direct approach and skepticism about whether real change would follow. Amara sat on the edge of her bed, scrolling through the comments with mixed emotions. On one hand, the public conversation about discrimination in air travel was important and overdue. On the other hand, she hadn't planned to become the face of that conversation, and the attention felt overwhelming. Her phone rang, her mother calling from Chicago. "Baby, I just saw you on the news," Denise Johnson exclaimed. "Are you okay? What happened?" As Amara recounted the day's events, her mother listened with the particular understanding that came from her own lifetime of similar experiences. "I'm proud of you," Denise said when Amara finished. "Not just for standing your ground, but for turning this into something bigger than yourself. Your father would be so proud too." The mention of her father brought tears to Amara's eyes. "I kept thinking about him today, Mom. About how he always said that change doesn't happen unless someone forces the issue." "That's right," Denise affirmed. "And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be moved from a space where you have every right to be." After the call, Amara opened her laptop to review the notes she'd made during the executive meeting. What had begun as a routine business trip to present her security algorithm had expanded into something far more significant: an opportunity to address systemic discrimination at an institutional level. A notification appeared on her screen, an email from Marcus Reynolds. The subject line read simply, "Tomorrow's meeting agenda, your input requested." The journey toward transformation had only just begun, but the flight that had started with humiliation was now landing in possibility. 6 months after that fateful flight from Chicago to San Francisco, Amara Johnson stood at the podium in Skyway's corporate headquarters, addressing the company's quarterly all-hands meeting as its new Chief Innovation Officer. The journey from first-class passenger to C-suite executive had been unexpected but remarkably fulfilling. Today marks the official launch of our integrated bias detection system, Amara announced to the assembled employees and virtual participants joining from around the world. What began as a security algorithm has evolved into a comprehensive tool that monitors service delivery across our entire operation. On the screen behind her, real-time data visualizations displayed service metrics broken down by demographic categories. The system tracked everything from wait times at check-in to beverage service in flight, identifying patterns that might indicate systematic differential treatment. The data doesn't lie. Amara continued scrolling through several screens of statistics. 6 months ago, first-class passengers of color waited an average of 12 minutes longer for service requests than white passengers. Today, that gap has been reduced to under 1 minute. The transformation hadn't been easy. In the days following that pivotal flight, Marcus had made sweeping changes throughout the organization. The emergency executive meeting he'd called had lasted nearly 7 hours, resulting in a comprehensive action plan that touched every aspect of the airline's operations. A thorough investigation had revealed that discrimination complaints were being systematically downgraded by a small group of senior managers who viewed diversity concerns as political correctness gone too far. Those managers had been removed or reassigned, and the complaint review process had been completely restructured, with direct oversight from the executive team. What surprised me most, Marcus admitted joining Amara at the podium, wasn't that discrimination existed within our company. What shocked me was how efficiently it had been hidden from those of us with the power to address it. Systems had been created specifically to bury evidence of bias and protect those perpetuating it. The audience shifted uncomfortably, many of them recalling their own roles, whether active or passive, in maintaining those systems. But today isn't about dwelling on past failures, Marcus continued. It's about celebrating the progress we've made and acknowledging the work still ahead. And none of this would have been possible without Amara's brilliance, courage, and willingness to help us transform rather than simply exposing our flaws. Amara nodded appreciatively before continuing her presentation. The algorithm doesn't just monitor service metrics. It also tracks hiring patterns, promotion decisions, and performance evaluations. By identifying statistical anomalies, we can catch potential bias before it becomes systemic. From the back of the room, a familiar face watched the presentation with complicated emotions. Bethany Miller, once the senior flight attendant who had humiliated Amara, now served in an entirely different capacity. After her suspension, Bethany had faced a choice: termination or participation in a newly created restorative justice program. The program required her to deeply examine her own biases, participate in extensive diversity training, and work directly with passengers who had experienced discrimination. To everyone's surprise, including her own, Bethany had embraced the opportunity for growth. Her initial defensiveness had gradually given way to genuine remorse as she recognized patterns in her behavior that she had previously rationalized or denied. "I didn't think of myself as racist," she had admitted during a particularly powerful session with a mediator. "I thought I was just maintaining standards. But when I really examined who I considered standard and who I considered exceptions, the pattern was undeniable." Now, 6 months later, Bethany served as one of Skyway's most effective diversity trainers, sharing her own journey as a cautionary tale and a path to redemption. She worked primarily with flight crews, helping them recognize and address their own unconscious biases before they manifested in discriminatory behavior. As the presentation concluded, Bethany approached the podium where Amara was gathering her materials. "Miss Johnson," she began hesitantly, "I know we've spoken during the program sessions, but I wanted to thank you again for your part in my education." Amara regarded her thoughtfully. Their previous interactions during Bethany's restorative justice program had been professional, but understandably guarded. "You've done the hard work yourself," Amara acknowledged. "Not everyone would have been willing to confront their biases so honestly." "I almost wasn't," Bethany admitted. "My first instinct was to blame you, to claim you were oversensitive or misinterpreting my actions. It took weeks of reflection and some pretty uncomfortable conversations before I could see the truth." Their exchange was interrupted as Marcus joined them, his expression warm as he greeted Bethany. "How are the new flight crews responding to the training program?" "Better than we expected," Bethany reported, "especially when we show them the data from the algorithm. It's harder to deny patterns when they're displayed so clearly." The three of them moved toward the reception area, where Skyway's employees mingled with industry representatives and media. The company's transformation had attracted significant attention within the aviation world, with several competing airlines now exploring similar initiatives. "I never imagined my algorithm would have this kind of impact," Amara confessed as they surveyed the crowded room. "I designed it to improve security screening, not to transform corporate culture." "The best innovations often find applications beyond their original purpose," Marcus observed. "Just like the best people often find themselves in roles they never anticipated." He was referring not only to Amara's unexpected journey to the C-suite, but also to his own evolution as a leader. The incident had forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about the company he had built, how systems of bias could flourish even under the leadership of someone committed to equity if that commitment wasn't backed by rigorous oversight and accountability. The changes at Skyway's hadn't been limited to policies and procedures. In partnership with Amara, Marcus had launched a groundbreaking mentorship program for underrepresented youth interested in aviation and technology. The program provided internships, scholarships, and direct mentoring from company executives. "The first cohort graduates next month," Marcus reminded them. 25 students who might never have seen themselves in this industry otherwise. As they continued through the reception, a young black woman approached Amara with evident admiration. "Miss Johnson, I'm Taylor Morris, one of the software engineers implementing your algorithm for gate assignments. Your work has been incredibly inspiring. I'd love to hear more about the implementation challenges." Amara responded warmly, engaging the young engineer in a technical discussion that quickly drew in several other IT staff. From across the room, Marcus watched the interaction with satisfaction. This was exactly the kind of organic mentorship and professional networking that had traditionally been less accessible to employees from underrepresented groups. The reception was winding down when Marcus received an urgent text from operations. A first-class passenger was having an issue on an incoming flight from Atlanta. The message was brief, but concerning. Similar situation to Johnson incident. Need guidance. Marcus immediately alerted Amara, and they made their way to the arrival gate. There they found a scene disturbingly reminiscent of what had transpired 6 months earlier, a young black woman in tears in the first-class cabin, surrounded by uncomfortable passengers and uncertain crew members. But this time something was different. As they approached, they could see that several passengers were already speaking up in the woman's defense. The flight attendant, recognizing the situation as it was unfolding, had already called for a supervisor and was apologizing for any misunderstanding. Most surprisingly, it was Bethany who reached the aircraft first, immediately taking charge of the situation with a calm authority that diffused tensions rather than escalating them. "My name is Bethany Miller, Diversity Training Coordinator," she introduced herself to the distressed passenger. "Whatever has happened, I want you to know that your experience matters to us and we're here to address it properly." The young woman, a medical student named Layla Washington, explained that a gate agent had repeatedly questioned her first-class ticket and suggested she might be more comfortable in economy. When she had insisted on her assigned seat, the agent had made a call to warn the flight crew about a situation in first class. "The entire flight, I felt like I was being watched and judged," Layla explained, wiping away tears of frustration. "It was humiliating." "I understand completely," Bethany assured her with a sincerity born of her own journey. "And I'm deeply sorry this happened. Would you be willing to file a formal report? I promise it will receive immediate attention from our executive team." As Marcus and Amara observed this exchange, they exchanged a significant look. The incident was troubling evidence that despite all their efforts, bias still existed within the company. But the response to that bias had changed dramatically, suggesting that the cultural transformation they had worked so hard to implement was taking hold. Later that evening, at a small dinner celebration for the algorithm launch, Marcus raised his glass in a toast to Amara Johnson, whose brilliance and courage changed not just an algorithm, but an entire company. And to Marcus Reynolds, Amara countered, who proved that accountability and transformation are possible when leaders are willing to see their blind spots. Bethany, who had been invited to join them after her handling of the gate incident, added her own perspective. "6 months ago, I was the problem. Today, I'm part of the solution." That kind of change only happens when people are given both the truth about their behavior and the opportunity to do better. As dinner concluded, Amara excused herself to take a call from her mother, stepping onto the restaurant's quiet patio. "How does it feel?" Denise Johnson asked when Amara described the day's events. "Seeing the real-world impact of your work." Amara gazed up at the night sky, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. "It feels like Dad was right all along," she replied softly. "He always said that systems don't change unless people with the courage to speak truth meet people with the humility to hear it." "He would be so proud," Denise affirmed, "not just of what you've built, but of who you've become in the process." The next morning, Amara boarded a Skyways flight back to Chicago for a brief visit home. As she settled into her first-class seat, the lead flight attendant approached with a warm, genuine smile. "Welcome aboard, Miss Johnson," she said, offering a champagne flute. "It's an honor to have you flying with us today." Amara accepted the drink with a smile of her own, noting the authenticity in the attendant's greeting. It wasn't deference or special treatment, just the same professional courtesy extended to every passenger, regardless of what they looked like or where they came from. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Amara glanced at the empty seat beside her, remembering Marcus in 2A on that transformative flight 6 months ago. Sometimes the most powerful changes began with the smallest moments of recognition, one person seeing another's humanity when everyone else looked away. The aircraft lifted into the sky carrying not just passengers, but the promise of what was possible when organizations committed to genuine transformation. The journey wasn't over. Bias and discrimination wouldn't disappear overnight, but each flight, each interaction, each policy change brought them closer to the airline they aspired to be. And that Amara reflected as the landscape below gave way to clouds was how real change happened, not in sweeping gestures or grand declarations, but in the daily commitment to see, acknowledge, and address injustice wherever it appeared. This powerful story reminds us that true change requires both courage and accountability. It takes courage like Amara's to stand firm in spaces where others question your belonging and accountability, like Marcus's to recognize when systems you've built harbor hidden biases. Real transformation doesn't happen through policies alone, but through the willingness of individuals to see uncomfortable truths. The most insidious discrimination often hides in plain sight, in standard procedures, quality control, and unwritten norms that selectively target certain groups. These patterns become visible only when someone in power is willing to truly see them, or when those experiencing them refuse to accept their treatment as normal. Perhaps most importantly, this story shows that genuine change is possible. Bethany's journey from perpetrator to advocate demonstrates that with proper accountability, even those who've caused harm can become champions for justice. Systems built on bias can be redesigned, and organizations can evolve when leaders prioritize equity over comfort. In the end, discrimination thrives in silence. It's disrupted when people like Amara refuse to shrink themselves, when observers find their voices, and when leaders like Marcus choose truth over convenience. Has this story touched something in your experience? Have you witnessed discrimination in supposedly premium spaces? Or been the Amara in your own story? Share your experience in the comments below. Your voice matters in this crucial troubling conversation. If this journey of accountability and transformation resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that illuminate the path toward a more equitable world. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that they belong in every space they've earned the right to occupy. Tag someone who has stood up against injustice or who helped transform a system from within. Together, we can create ripple effects of change that transform not just airlines, but our entire society. Thank you for witnessing this journey of courage, accountability, and transformation. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most powerful act is simply refusing to move from spaces where you have every right to be.